You're listening to Thunderquack Podcast Network.
Hello and welcome back to Thunderquack Perfect 10, the podcast where we explore pop culture masterpieces. I'm your host, Michael Cohen. What is a perfect 10? Simply put, a perfect 10 is a piece of pop culture media we love unconditionally. So throw away your review score because around here, everything is a 10 out of 10. Grab some pixie dust and find your happy thought because we're off to Neverland to talk about the 1991 film that Steven Spielberg had no confidence in, but kids all over the world fell in love with. That's right, we're talking Hook with Danielle. Welcome back to the podcast.
Thank you.
Our holiday tradition now to do this. A Christmassy movie. Technically, this is a Christmas movie for anybody who wants to doubt it. If you haven't watched it in a while, it takes place at Christmas time, and also the words "Merry Christmas" are said in the film. So it is absolutely without a doubt a Christmas movie.
Yes.
And I'm really excited to talk about it with you and to continue our holiday tradition of talking about Christmas movies on Perfect 10. So thanks for coming back.
Thanks for inviting me.
This is an interesting movie to dig into because this is definitely one that I think pushes the boundaries of Perfect 10. Because rewatching it, and I hadn't watched it in a long time, rewatching it, I was like, I understand where Steven Spielberg is coming from now. But also at the same time, when this movie hits, it hits hard. It hits real hard. So it absolutely qualifies as a perfect 10, but the funny thing about it is that I think he had to be there. I think he had to be there.
So my kids have seen it, and their age ranges are 15, one's getting ready to turn 12, one's getting ready to turn 9 next week, and then the other's 5. They've all seen it, but the only one that really gets it is the 15-year-old, and the others are kind of like, yeah, that's nice, I don't really care. Whereas me and my husband are like, oh my gosh, Hook, oh, I remember this when I was little. So it's definitely one of those, I don't know, niche millennial films or something.
Yeah. Oh, for sure. Okay, before we get into the nitty gritty of it, let me just run down for everybody what this movie is. So Hook is a 1991 feature film directed by Steven Spielberg and starring Robin Williams, Dustin Hoffman, Julia Roberts, Bob Hoskins, Maggie Smith, and, of course, Dante Basco. This film dares to ask the question, what if Peter Pan grew up to be an asshole? Robin Williams gives a brilliant performance as no-nonsense businessman and derelict father, Peter Panning. But when his children, Jack and Maggie, are kidnapped by his old nemesis, he'll have to travel back to Neverland and rediscover his inner child to rescue them. A bold and adventurous take on the classic tale, Hook spares no expense, featuring unbelievable production design that brings Neverland to life. So unsheath that sword and let's go to war with some pirates as we talk Hook. And we got to get it in here. We got to have a bangarang in this one. Like I said, this movie, I get it. I get where Steven Spielberg is coming from. I will say right off the bat, it is a rough edit. It is very clear. I'm just going to get this out of the way up front, and then we're only going to talk about awesome stuff in this movie. It is very clear that they shot a bunch of stuff, and in the edit bay, it was like, what is this movie? What am I doing? What did I do? What was I thinking on the day? We missed this. We didn't get that. This doesn't make any sense. How did they get from here to there? Just whatever. If we cut it fast enough, no one's gonna notice. And
Yeah.
unfortunately, I think that it didn't work. But because there is a solid 20-minute chunk in the beginning of the second act of this film that is absolute cinematic nonsense, by which I mean like in terms of everything that you learn in film school not to do, they absolutely
Hmm.
do. To
Hmm.
get Peter from London to the pirate ship to the Lost Boys, it's like whatever, don't worry about. And it's very clear that there was other stuff either in the script or that was shot that didn't work because of special effects or whatever reason, I don't know.
Yeah.
But yeah, it is like cut to this, cut to this, cut to this. I mean, we go from him being I like basically landing in Neverland near the pirates, um and then not being able to rescue the kids, getting pushed off the plank, right? Like walked off the plank or whatever
Yeah,
into the water.
that whole mermaid sequence is
Yeah.
just weird. Like, even as a kid, I was like, this feels disjointed, but whatever.
Yeah.
And
And yeah,
I
and
just
then
finished rewatching it, and it's still it's like, wait, hang on. Now there's suddenly mermaids, and now he's in a seashell, and now he's in a tree, and then he's looking out from the tree, and the ship is way over there, but he just fell off the ship. What's happening?
yep. 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 And then he fall like he we get that great shot. It's a like it's worth it for the shot because you get that shot of him standing sort of on top of
Yeah.
the not it's like a mountain. I don't know what you would call that, but like that sort of outcropping that's like on the outside of Neverland, and it's this
Hmm.
great vista of the entire island, and you're like, oh my god, like that's Neverland, like from the books, from the animated movie, from everything,
Yeah.
like that's, but it looks real, right? And then he just it just cuts and he's falling through
Down that little
snow
snowy hill. Yeah. And there was no
into the
snow
Lost
seen
Boys
anywhere
village, right?
else.
So that
Yeah.
like that indicates to me there's a whole sequence missing in this movie. And one of the things that I will note is that the I'm going to use this term, but only because it's like within universe, the term that is used, even though it's incorrect. But the Indians, right? They are
Hmm.
completely missing from the story. And
Yeah.
if I
I think
had to
they
guess,
get
there's a connection there. Yeah,
one
yeah,
mention.
there is. Yeah, there's the mention of like with his scar, the tiger lily incident, and then somebody at one point at another point says something about like when they're
Yeah,
talking about sort of
so
like all of the things going on, like something something, and then the Indians
yeah,
and
after
this and
Smee
pirates and blah blah blah.
had stopped Hook from his yet again attempted
Yeah,
suicide, and so he sits him in the
yeah,
chair, and he's like, "Why don't we go kill some Indians?" And he's like, "I'm tired of killing Indians."
yeah,
Like,
yeah,
oh,
yeah. That's right.
okay, all right.
Yeah. Yeah. So I don't know. I don't know if that was like a thing where it's like, oh, we removed that. It's 1991. I don't
Yeah,
imagine that there's a lot of cultural sensitivity around that sort of thing at that time. We're like on the cusp of that being a conversation that needed to happen a lot sooner. But yeah, it's very clear that there is some story missing from this movie in the edit, and that like they just needed to get it from one spot to the other.
yeah,
And the thing with that is that Spielberg is actually like notorious for this sort of thing, for these edits that I there are continuity problems and all of that sort of thing. But most of the time when he does it, it's very well motivated, and it's only the sort of thing that you notice when you've like watched the movie a couple dozen times. This is one where
yeah.
like what trying to watch it objectively as an adult, I was like, oh yeah, if I were the age I am now in 1991 watching this movie with my kids, I definitely would have been like, oh, that's rough, right? Like it would have been very apparent to me. as opposed to like, because like he uses these tricks in Indiana Jones, he uses these tricks in Close Encounters, in Jurassic Park.
Mm,
There are lots of places where it's like, wait a second, that character was on the other side of the other character, so clearly there's something missing in the edit.
yeah.
But it doesn't matter because like Spielberg again is a master of the like sort of the continuing motion in the cut,
Yes.
which
Yes.
is a thing that distracts you from continuity errors, right? So if a character is
Yep.
moving from one side of the screen to the other, and then you make a cut and they're continuing that action in the next shot, then you kind of
Your
just
brain
follow
kind of
that
fills in
action.
that gap. Yeah.
Yeah. And so he does that a lot, but you can tell that here he was doing it. And I didn't look up the name of his editor on this movie, but I'm sure it's the same editor that he's used for everything else. But because that tends to be the case, so that directors and editors tend to go together like hands and gloves. Uh,
Michael Kahn. Michael
yeah,
Kahn.
there you go. Yeah, yeah, and yeah, Michael Kahn. I guarantee you edited pretty much everything else. So, um, yeah, like I these decisions are the sort of things that like you can see him making in other places in other movies. Even in this movie he does it a few times where it's like, oh yeah, that like where it's the right call, right? but
Hmm.
but but you can tell that there was a little bit of like, man, just get this going. I think the other problem is that the magic doesn't really show up until almost halfway through the movie, and that's a problem. Like that's a real problem, and it's the moment
Hmm.
when they're eating the food, and
Yeah.
he like flings it at Rufio. That is the moment where the movie turns, and all of a sudden like we are into the fun adventure of it, and it
Yeah.
comes so late in the film. So it's either they shot stuff that didn't work, or in the edit he was like, these kids are gonna be dying in the seats if we keep making him an asshole. They're never gonna
Right.
like this Peter if he
Yeah.
goes through all of this. And he's like, I hate Neverland. I hate this. I hate these flowers. I hate this thing. I hate that thing. And it's like, yeah, we're gonna miss out on entire things that we shot, but we gotta get to that moment faster. Right. So that would be my guess. Because then from that moment forward, the movie like soars, and that is an intentional pun. But it absolutely like picks up and is great after that. It's also really great up until the kids are kidnapped, like up until they come home from the event, and like it's like all of that setup is very good 90s you know sort of post Reagan parents suck. And jobs are the worst, and everybody wishes that they could be a kid. And
Yeah.
this is why you're a bad parent. It's very
Yeah,
classic
it
90s
is
stuff.
it is very that weird pace because I imagine seeing it, like you said, like as an adult taking your kid, it's Peter Pan
Mm,
movie. I loved, Disney animated Peter Pan. Let's go see this. And it is because from an adult's point, you're sitting there kind of getting guilt tripped, for the first hour. And then the second half, it's very silly, which I would think would be fun, but at the same time, you've been kind of like ground into the dirt, and now it's like, okay, let's
yeah.
get up and jog around. And you're like, but I feel awful about myself as an adult, so it's kind of
Yeah.
hard to like you can still enjoy the fun, but it's not as lighthearted as it is. And then as a kid, you've had to sit there for the first hour and watch it and be like, man, you know, I really relate to these kids. My parents suck too. This is really depressing. Oh,
Yeah.
okay, now we're having fun. Oh, that's really cool. But then it's kind of like, okay, that's over. Which as an adult, you're like, okay, he's a grown up and his kids are little. And of course, they have to go back to the real world. But from a kid's point of view, it's kind of like, well, we just started having fun. Why do we have to
Yeah.
leave?
Yeah. Yeah. There's definitely at the end of the movie, it's like there's two things that happen, right? Because it's like, well, you've just reconnected with your kids and you're in Neverland and now they can fly and all of this, and we're just gonna go. But also Rufio just died, guys. Like Rufio
Yeah, for
just
some reason,
died.
I mean, I remember as a kid being like, "Oh my gosh, he died." Like, you don't see anybody die, like, not even Hook dies.
Mhm.
I mean, poor guy who gets stuck in the boo box with the scorpions, we don't technically see him die, but Rufio
Yeah,
dies?
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Really, like, we know we have to get him out of the way so Pan can be the official Pan, but then minutes later, he just passes off the sword like, "Well, I guess you're the new me now." Like,
Yeah.
I don't
Yeah,
meh.
it's a weird choice. It's a very weird choice to do that within the kids movie, and then to not really address it, to just kind of move past it, and then by the time they get back to London, it's like it didn't happen. It's not,
Yeah.
and he's an adult. He's an adult man, and it's like they get back and he's like, "Wow, that was so much fun. We just had so much fun." He doesn't have like any remorse of like, "I got that kid killed. I got that
Yeah.
I got that 14-year-old kid killed. I definitely like my actions and inaction definitely led to the death of that 14-year-old, and that sucks. And I need to really nope, it's okay. It's
Yeah.
fine. It's fine.
I'd also
People
like
just
to
got it.
point out too, like I said, as a little kid watching it, it's
Mhm.
super fun. I like it. And as an adult, it is fun and I like it. But it just dawned on me because my 15-year-old, she was walking through the room when it came in and she's a big Peter Pan fan.
Mhm.
And, she was walking through at that point when um Rufio is, fighting Hook and all that, and she's like, "Oh, hang on, I have to sit here and watch this." And
Yeah.
he gets stabbed, and of course, there's that little like micro mourning death scene or whatever. And she's like, "Oh, I'm gonna start crying. I have to leave." And just because of her saying that, it dawned on me: Rufio is the only teenager depicted in this
Mhm.
movie, and he's the only person that dies. So I don't know if that's just a weird choice nobody was aware of, or if there's something a bit more behind it of like the child in you has to die to, I guess, grow up. Because I mean, even then, like, yes, Pan's done accepted his childlike ways, but at the end, he's like, okay, but now I still have to go be an adult for my children. I don't know. It was just a very weird realization of like the teen is the only one that gets murdered.
Yeah, the interesting thing I think about all of it is that Rufio is a character that exists only in Hook, right?
Yeah.
He's a concoction for this film. In every other iteration that I'm aware of, the Lost Boys are all like under 10 years old, right? Um,
Mhm.
and Peter is generally seen as like the oldest one, right?
Yeah.
And he would be like 10, 11, 12, right? So Rufio being almost a young adult, right? I is an interesting choice because he is. I do think that there's something there. I think that it got lost somewhere in the edit, in the shoot, in something of like that Rufio is older than everybody else, and as a result, he is that much closer to what they would consider like a pirate, right? Like he is
Yeah.
he's so much more aggressive than anybody else. Like he like the hierarchy really matters to him, whereas it
Mhm.
doesn't matter to any of the other Lost Boys. But it matters to him that he is the one that's in charge. You can see that like he is very much as a teenager on the cusp of these things that adults consider more important than playing, right?
Mhm.
Um, a- and he wants to go and kill pirates, and he wants to go and have a war, and he is always ready to fight. Um, and so I think that there was meant to be something there of like, and obviously the purpose of the character is that he is a foil to Peter Pan, right? Like
Right. Yeah.
that's the whole that he exists in the story, is that in the absence of Peter Pan, somebody else had to take up that role, and that's Rufio, and he's been doing that for, at this point, decades, right?
Right.
Um, but 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 something does get lost there in like in I think it's just the fact that there is no consequence to it, right? Like he dies, and there's a moment where Peter sort of references it as they're about to leave, and Hook is like aren't you gonna fight me, sort of thing, and he's goading him, and he's like I'll chase your children's children and all of that. And Peter sort of turns back and he's like, you kidnapped my kids, you did this, you did that, you killed Rufio, and like that's it, like that's
Yeah.
and it's like so let's fight, right? And then they fight, and then that's just kind of the end of it. He gets swallowed by the croc, and then we just sort of move on. And then here you go, to the one kid. Here's the sword. Take care of everybody that's smaller than you. He's the biggest kid, right?
Yeah.
And I don't know. Like it's just there is. It does feel like there is a part of a message missing for sure. Because then we just fly back to London and everything is fine. Everything
Hmm.
is okay. It's hunky dory, and it's like, yeah, well, we really didn't resolve that. I But we also we don't spend any time with Rufio. We don't get to know that character. We don't really understand why he ticks or any of that. Like that, they never have a meaningful conversation of any kind.
Yeah.
um and I think in place of any of that kind of character development, instead we get a very weird, but I'm sure that many people like, this story of about Tink being in love with Peter, right? Which is like, I mean, like that is not an uncommon reading of Peter Pan. I
Oh,
think
yeah.
like even in the Disney animated feature, it's very clear that like Tink is jealous of Wendy. That's always been part of it. But like it's weird because like he's got kids, he has a wife, and they have this moment, and yet like this is 90s stuff though. This is so 90s where it's like the unrequited love from the beautiful woman to the schlubby guy,
Yeah.
and he can kiss her, and we don't consider it cheating on his wife. We don't consider it a betrayal of their like. And the wife, let's be super clear, Moira is a non-character in this story, a total non-character. She is simply there
She's
to
there
be
to
a
give the
nag, and
lecture. That's
yeah,
it.
yeah. And again, it could not be more 90s. It could not be more early 90s than having a woman, a wife specifically, in a story solely to fill the role of being the thing that is standing in the way of our male protagonist and whatever it is that they consider important. Now, Moira is correct, right? So there's a
Mhm.
little, it's a little bit better than like, say, I don't know, like Jill on Home Improvement, who is like the archetypical nagging wife. But um like there is still that aspect of like I do have a moment as an adult watching this where like he's on the phone and this $5 billion b billion with a b in 1991, this $5 billion
Yeah.
deal has just fallen through because the land that they were going to develop has some endangered owl
The
on it.
owls, yeah.
That sucks. Like like as an adult, that sucks. And is he neglecting his family? Yes. Is he also in the midst of a massively important business deal that probably involves the livelihoods of thousands of people? And that's where the pressure is coming from. I understand that, right? And as
Yeah.
a kid in 1991, I didn't. He was just a bad dad. He's all he cares about is work. And I couldn't relate because my parents were there for us all the time, taking us to baseball and hockey, and like they gave my oldest brother more attention than they gave to me
Mhm.
specifically. I'm the youngest, so it was like, yeah, whatever, Mike. Here's a comic book. I here's a video game. Here's a TV show. Just
See, I
revisit.
actually had the
But
opposite. I had the
that's
opposite.
different.
My mom stayed home, with me, and then 8 years later, my brother, but, um, my dad, he was the one that worked a lot. He also traveled overseas. a lot, and then
Mhm.
he would be gone for weeks at a time, and he was always getting phone calls at weird hours because of time differences. And so the fact of, he's on the phone, he shows up
Yeah.
late, or he's, I gotta go step into this room and take this phone call. It's very important. He comes out, looking frustrated. He's kind of snappy, with me or my mom. And so I got that. And the fact when Moira throws his cell phone out the window, I was just kind of like,
Mhm. Yeah.
I don't
Yeah. Well, yeah.
it doesn't fully translate how big of an issue because 5 billion means nothing to little old me, but
Mhm.
I understand the gist of this was something important, that was something very stressful that he was working towards, and she just chucked his phone out a window. That's
Yeah.
To me,
There,
that's
there's
worse
a
than kids jumping around.
there's a component there in that scene where the kids are bouncing off the walls, screaming at the top of their lungs in this little house in London, and they are completely out of control. And
Yeah.
she's just sitting there smiling at them and like, oh, what a joy these children are.
Nah.
That I don't find. I like listen. The pixie dust and flying is more realistic than both parents
Yeah.
sitting in that room and being like,
Oh,
this is
yeah.
acceptable behavior, right? It's like they are jumping on and off of the beds. It's just absolute chaos, and they're trying to
Yeah.
get ready to go out to this big fundraiser or like this gala event. In any other circumstance other than like the conceit of this film, right?
Yeah.
Like if that were happening, if my girls were doing that while I was on the phone trying to like deal with this and like something major was like falling through and it's like this is a big deal, like this could literally be my job, like this could be my entire job, hey,
Yeah.
this orphanage that we're building, you know how much money my business has and like I have personally contributed into this orphanage being built, like most of it, right? That's clearly the through line here. He's making the
Yeah.
speech like it's like clearly Peter Panning was integral in this orphanage being built, which is only a result of the fact that he is a successful business person and he's trying to like pay that forward in this way, right? Like there's a thing
Mhm.
there where it's like all framed as bad, but in reality I look at like as an adult I look at it and I go like this is all happening and then this business deal is falling apart, which could mean like very bad things for them when they get back to America. and
Yeah.
and the and Moira is just sitting there watching these kids bouncing off of the wall screaming in his ear while he's on the phone, and then he, I think rightly, turns around and goes, everybody shut up, because I'll
Yeah.
tell you, there would have been some extra words that I would have added in that sentence to my kids that would
Right.
have made this an R-rated film. And I would have been like, everybody get out of the bleep, bleep, bleeping room right now. I will be done in 5 minutes and then we
Yeah.
can do whatever. Please, I just need to do this. And she just stands there and watches it. And then he gets and then she takes, and it's like, excuse me? What just happened? There are two
Yeah.
parents in this situation. Could you not take them downstairs? Could you not take them into the children's room? Because this is the adults' room. Like, like there were so many things that should have been happening there so that he could have that conversation and then be done with it. Because obviously he's like, I got to finish getting ready and get to this thing. Because then they go to the thing. It's not like he goes and finds another phone and finishes the
Mhm.
conversation, which is also weird to me. It's like his cell phone goes out the window, so now he's unable to talk to anybody. But it's just like that scene really like ruffled my feathers in a way, because I was like I get it, he missed the baseball game and he misses all the baseball games. I get it, that sucks. And this movie traumatized me in a way that like I am always there for my girls for their dance stuff and their school concerts, and I will screw over, and I think that many people in our generation will screw over their stuff at work, right? Like it's like I will get further behind on my projects because, well, I got a Christmas concert on Tuesday. Like, literally, that's a literal statement. That's not, I'm not being metaphorical. We got the Christmas concert on Tuesday. I do have other stuff that I should be working on, but I got to go to this Christmas concert on Tuesday. And I got to
Oh,
take
see,
them
no,
to
I,
dance on.
I was more in Peter's shoes. I mean, I don't know, I guess because of the line of work I used to have, but like if you
Yeah.
even said, like, I mean, I had jobs where I was like, hey, I had a grandma that died. I need to go to her funeral. Or, hey, I've had a doctor tell me that it's paramount that my child be rushed to the emergency room. And I've had
Mm,
employers just look at me like, you're not leaving this building.
yeah.
Um, so the fact that he's like, I have to do all these things for work. Sorry, I can't, you know, I love you, you're my kid, but I have to do this because it's adult stuff that's important that, as adults, we understand that can make or break your entire life if you get fired. But yeah, so I could relate to that. I relate to the kids being disappointed, and I relate to Peter just trying to do the best he can in his own little work bubble. So nobody wins in that scenario.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, man. Like that. It's just the idea that a $5 billion business deal was collapsing, and that his wife was like, you need to pay attention to your children right now. And it's like, excuse me?
But
I
but
don't know.
but
It's
we're
just,
gonna
it's
but we're
so
gonna
absurd.
leave in 20 minutes.
Yeah,
But we're
yeah,
gonna
but then
leave
like
in
tuck
20
them into
minutes.
bed because they're not coming to the event because no kids allowed at this gala event.
Yeah.
And it's, yeah, it's, I get it, Steve, I get it, man, I get it. This movie is all over the place, but but this movie is also just pure magic. Like, it
Yeah.
is also absolutely pure magic. So I we've gotten into like so many things already, but I just want to sort of rewind a little bit so that we can get back to time and place. So how old were you when this came out in 91?
Oh, December 91. Okay, hang on. I have to do math.
Yeah.
So I would have turned 4 in
Yeah.
the October before this. So yeah, I was just a bit over 4 years old.
Yeah. So
So,
I was like, it says 1991, so I was like 6, right? Like
yeah.
6, like going on 7, so like first grade, right? Like that's the thing. It was first grade, and I was obsessed with this movie.
Oh, yeah.
And my brother Chris. So I have 2 older brothers, Anthony, who's almost 5 years older than me, and then Chris, who is almost 3 years older than me. And Chris has Down syndrome, and so Chris and I at that age were much closer developmentally. And it, like,
Oh.
around the time that I became, like, I turned 10, I started to like eclipse him, right? Or not eclipse him, but
Mhm.
like I don't know, like move faster developmentally
Yeah.
than he would.
I
And
don't I
so
don't think I actually saw this film though till I was I think 6. Cuz it was around that time
oh
frame
yeah,
cuz I know you and I had this conversation in one of the other podcasts too where like I saw Star Wars and dad's like, "Oh, well if you love this one, you're going to love these other ones." So it was like the
yeah,
gauntlet of Lucas and Spielberg films, and it was
yeah,
in
yeah,
that
yeah,
time frame where it was like, "Oh, now you're always watching Peter Pan and launching yourself off the sofa trying to fly. So let's watch Hook together." So it was right in there. So, yeah,
yeah.
between 4 and 6 is when I saw it.
Peter Pan is the first movie that I remember seeing in a movie theater. So
Mm,
there's a pretty deep connection there, and obviously that was like a re-release, right? Like that was
right.
and it would have been maybe like a couple of years prior to this. And I here's the wild thing about that. I remember this day very well because and actually this would place it in time. I don't know when Honey I Shrunk the Kids came out, but the
Oh, yeah.
before Peter Pan, the trailer for Honey I Shrunk the Kids played, and that trailer has them riding on the back of a bee and fighting a scorpion and all that stuff, and it terrified me. It terrified me because I think I was probably 4 or 5 years old,
Yeah, I
And
remember the ant. Yeah.
yeah, yeah, and I here's the wild thing about that. I was at that movie. It was me and my two brothers, and I think there might have been. I think maybe one of my cousins was there, but my oldest brother Anthony, is the oldest of our generation, right? Like he's the oldest
Mhm.
grandkid. We would have said at the time. I so like I think that one or two of my cousins was there as well. But if I was five, let's say that I was five, he is 4.5-ish years older than me, so he would have not been 10 yet, right?
Mm.
And he was in charge. We were dropped off at the movie theater, and
Whoa.
then and went into the movie theater, and there were no adults with us. There it was just us. And so because I freaked out and he had to deal with it, right? Because if there was an adult there,
Oh.
the adult would have taken me out of the theater and brought me back in. But he
Yeah.
took me out of the theater and was like, that's not the movie, that's not what we're watching. Like, I remember this conversation, it's so vivid for me. He's like, you need to calm down, we're gonna go back in, it's gonna be Peter Pan, it's a cartoon, this is what we came to watch. And like, he was very calm about it, and
Wow.
chilled me out, and we went back in.
You're lucky he didn't
But
punch you.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. But yeah, so like that is my first memory of going to the movies, and you would think that that would have like traumatized me, but then Peter Pan's such a great movie that I think I forgot, and we moved on, right? But yeah, so when Hook was coming out, I was like, oh my god, like this, I can't wait for this. It's gonna be so good. And so we saw it in the theater. We saw it in the theater. We
Mm.
had it on VHS, and we wore that tape out. And I brought up my brother Chris, my middle brother Chris, and like this is one of his favorite movies of all time. I think
Yeah.
he would watch this over and over. Like, it was one of those movies that like it would finish and we
Mhm.
would hit rewind and he would want to watch it again, and I'd be like, oh my god, we have watched this 10 times this week, can we please watch something else, or play video games or something? And he would just want to watch Hook over and over and over. So i I don't even know how many times I've seen this movie. Like, it would be impossible to know how many times
I'd
I've
say
seen
it's
this
a good
movie.
movie to watch at least 3 times in your life, as a child,
Yeah,
as a teen, and as an adult.
yeah,
Just simply
yeah,
because as a child, it's I I mean, you're probably not gonna get it, but it's kind of like, this is why adults are the way they are. Like, they've
yeah.
lost their magic. They've forgotten how to imagine, they are busy with work. They still love you, that, because they miss things doesn't mean they hate you. Um, they just have a lot going on in life, and they've forgotten their magic, and they just need a reminder sometimes. As a teen, I would say, like, here's all these childish things, but it's okay to still do them. And look at what you have to look forward to as an adult. So maybe don't rush it. And then as an adult, you're like, okay, you understand all these things that he's going through, all these, fears that he's developed, or all of the memories he's forgotten along the way. But don't forget, you still have a child at heart, and
Mm.
you're still capable of imagining and having fun, and do so while you can. And those were my takeaways, both like
Yeah.
my memories as a child and then as an adult rewatching it again. So, yeah, it's definitely something you can watch at almost every stage of life and
Mhm.
take away something.
Yeah, I think so. I think absolutely. And that's where like Spielberg talks about this as the movie that he's sort of like the least proud of.
Mhm.
And I find that really interesting because here's the thing.
Yeah.
I would say some of his more modern ones should take that should take that title, because I
Mhm.
really feel like some of his more recent films have been a little bit underwhelming. I would honestly say that like Kingdom of the Crystal Skull is probably the one that's like you should probably be the most sort of underwhelmed by that one.
Well,
But
so when it was being, because it got pitched to him, and he was
mm,
like, "Well, not right now." He turned it down, and
yeah,
I think that was when like his first child was being born, somewhere in there, and then eventually he came back to it and agreed. But it's around like that classic Spielberg era
yeah,
timeline when he is doing things like E.T. and whatnot, and Indiana Jones, and so you know and he's even said this, all these films are personal for him in a way. And he was addressing, his dad issues through them. And I can't help but wonder if this film had something to do with that.
mm,
Because, like, not necessarily, like the characters in, say, like E.T. or whatever, reconcile with their parents, or eventually in Last Crusade, Indiana Jones kind of reconciles with his dad and they come to an understanding. But like you don't necessarily feel that, because you get like Maggie's not really a question because she never lost her faith in her father specifically. But with Jack, there is that question of like,
yeah,
you know, he hates me. He doesn't want anything to do with me. So I'm going to hang out with these questionable people who at least encourage me. And then eventually he's like, "Oh yeah, that's my dad." And oh, he came back for me, which is great. And he's happy to have his dad back and he's happy to be home with his family, but there's never really the addressing of what's come between them. And obviously, the film's trying to wrap up as best as it can, as we said with the editing. But I can't help but wonder if maybe Spielberg didn't like it because that wasn't, I don't know, like as fleshed out as
mhm.
perhaps his other films. And maybe it left him unsettled in a way. I'm just guessing. But I can't help but wonder if maybe that's a factor.
Yeah. I think so. The interesting thing about Hook and where it sits in the filmography, right, is that obviously in 70 in 75 Jaws comes out and
Hmm.
I catapults him. All of a sudden he's got this status. Now, like when that movie comes out, like this is one of the wildest things is that you really have to look at this because it's the same with George on the
Hmm.
Star Wars side. These guys, they were barely adults when they
Yeah.
made these films. And then a couple years later in 81 he makes Raiders of the Lost Ark, which is like possibly the most perfect movie that's ever been made. Follows that up the next year with E.T.
Hmm.
Contributes to the Twilight Zone movie, which that's a whole other thing. But like, but he really is like one of the spearheading individuals on that. So that's like that was when he really started to become a powerhouse producer, right? Because of the success
Hmm.
of Raiders and E.T. Showing that he is not like a one-hit wonder. I mean, because you've got Jaws, Close Encounters follows it 2 years later, and Close Encounters was a massive movie as well. 1941 is a disappointment. I don't know if box office wise it was or not, but critically it wasn't. It wasn't really considered a great film. Um,
Hmm.
but yeah, like it's Twilight Zone and then Temple of Doom. And then you see him sort of like doing some other stuff with some TV shows and whatever because he's flexing that producer stuff and
Hmm.
making a bunch of weird like anthology things because he's obviously a big fan of the Twilight Zone. But then he does The Color Purple in 1985, which is that like I think The Color Purple is that movie that like finally sort of cements Spielberg as like a serious director. He doesn't just make these
Hmm.
adventure pop like pulp films.
Right.
And then Empire of the Sun, which is very serious, but then it's like a return to form with Last Crusade, which is also very much a perfect film.
Mm.
Um,
Well, it's
I
my favorite.
it, I think that's really common among Indiana Jones fans. That's like
Yeah.
that's the favorite indie. Um, but then like he follows that up with Always, and nobody ever talks about this movie. Like like this is a movie that people have like forgotten that Steven Spielberg made. Um, I much like 1941. I And then there's a bit of a gap because it's like 1989, um, and then the next movie that comes out is Hook in 91.
Mhm.
But the thing about that is that like you can tell that he's actually kind of already, and if you know the history of ILM, you know where they are with Jurassic Park at this point. Because
Mhm.
in
Yeah, because I was gonna
1991
say his very next one off of this is Jurassic Park, and
is Jurassic
to an
Park and
extent,
Schindler's
Schindler's
List.
List. Yeah.
That he was making at the same time, right?
Yeah.
I and the This is the most interesting thing about his career is that he made those two movies basically at the same time. He was filming Jurassic Park and getting Schindler's List ready to go at the same time, and he was sort of split between the two.
Yeah.
Went immediately on to Schindler's List, and then you see that there is a 4-year break, and the next movie that he makes is The Lost World, right?
Mhm.
Um, and he makes The Lost World, Amistad, Saving Private Ryan, all in the span of essentially a year, which is wild. It's wild that
Yeah.
he does that. Like this guy, like Spielberg is, uh, he's a very interesting person in this respect, and I think that you look at Hook, and I think like there's a very clear connection that, as you brought up, between him and sort of like his relationship to his children, because I 1991 is also when he marries Kate Capshaw,
Mhm.
and then they go on to have kids of their own, but he had a wife before that, and they had
Yeah.
children before that, so like how connected was he with them, and there's a lot of that, I think, in there, um, uh, with that story, and I think, yeah, I think he did put a lot of himself into it.
Yeah, it's a
But
transitional story of
yeah,
reflection, and that's kinda where he was in his life. You know, these themes of
yeah,
earlier films moving on to what was then more modern day themes in his life.
yeah,
So,
yeah.
yeah, it
Um,
fits. It fits.
it's and again, it's very interesting to then watch it as an adult, and that is why the stakes of all of the adult stuff is so wild, and I would
Mhm.
even say, like, to a degree, like disproportionate to what's happening on screen, because like the reality of the number 5 billion in 1991 is so absurd. It's so absurd that you can tell that that is him being like I have to express to these children how important this deal was.
Mhm.
Like children in the seats, meaning like, right, it's just everything with that is cranked up to such a degree. The disruptiveness of the kids, the importance of the deal, throwing the phone out the window, it all has to be like so heightened. But
Mhm.
I think where the movie kind of misses the mark on that stuff, and I think like if you talk to him now and we're like, okay, so like how would you approach that today? How could you do this differently, that you didn't have to get quite so arch with some of that stuff, but to express that, like, okay, we're in the real world, and then we're going to go to Neverland, and there's very much a Wizard of Oz element to this story
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
I don't think ever really comes across in the way that stuff is um is portrayed, right? So like in Wizard of
Mm.
Oz, we go from black and white to color, and that's how it's done, right? There's no clear stylistic change. There is a moment when they get back to the house where the kids have been taken by Hook, and we get some Dutch angles, and we get all of a sudden we're entering a world of fantasy, right?
Oh, yeah. Oh, that's one of my favorite scenes of that whole movie is
Yeah,
just that, like,
it's
eerie yeah,
it's
did
there.
I mean, they kinda did it, like, in Close Encounters and, like,
Yeah,
part of
yeah,
Poltergeist where, it's just
yeah.
that other creepy otherworldliness that's unsettling, and it always stuck with me like, "Ooh, that green lighting, that's scary."
Yeah, so like to me, there is. I think when Spielberg talks about this movie, and I get it as a creative, I understand where he's coming from when he's talking about it. Is that like I think I think they. I don't know why. I don't know where his focus was, if it was being pulled, because like the special effects are obviously very difficult to pull off at the time. There was
Mhm.
probably a lot that he wanted to do that they just couldn't do. I Because obviously we are right on the cusp of Jurassic Park and everything changing, and the whole world
Yeah.
opening up, and special effects being a completely different thing. I but but there are things that I think he missed on in the making of this film, or that didn't quite land in the way that they could have or should have, in this
Mm.
film. And I think like that's where, when he talks about the regret, and sort of like the, oh, this is the film I'm the least proud of, I didn't have a lot of confidence in it, all of that sort of, I think that's where that's coming from, is him as
Mhm.
a creative, as an artist, looking at it and going like, yeah, I kind of phoned parts of that in, didn't I? Like I didn't really
Yeah.
because the other part of it is that like there's an element, if we're gonna look at Wizard of Oz, which I wouldn't be surprised. I almost guarantee, it's funny that we're talking about that because Wicked just came out. But so
Mm.
maybe that's why that's in my head. I can't deny that that's probably one of the, but also like there is, knowing Spielberg as well as I do, having studied his filmmaking style very, very closely, and read about him, and watched all of the behind the scenes, everything on a bunch of his films.
Right.
Um, I look at this and I go like I think that he wanted that, and that's why like the movie starts in a very like standard 1990s family film sort of. When I think of 1990s, I always go back to Father of the Bride. That to me is like the most like middle of the road, four quadrant, appeals to everybody 90s movie is Father of the Bride, Steve Martin movie, right? Like to me,
Mhm.
it's just like the look of it, like it's got that sort of like browny gold taupe, everything's kind of like that golden color, and that flat lighting, and very objective camera. There's not a lot of like style to the camera moves or anything like that. It's a very straightforward film, and that's how this movie starts. And so I get that, but what's missing is the thing that, if you go back and you watch Wizard of Oz, even when we're in the black and white, something's going on, right? Like from the beginning
Mhm.
of that movie, something is happening. We're not sure what it is. And
Mhm.
then the tornado happens, and then we land in Oz, and all of a sudden it's in color, and we're taken to this other world. But like when we meet the characters, when we meet everybody in Wizard of Oz, there are these moments, and obviously it's to be like, hey, look at this person, and then at the end of the movie we're going to connect it, because all of the characters in Oz were the people in her life, right? Like it's
Right.
all
Yeah.
connected, right? So there's a little bit like the movie is bookended in that way. This movie is also bookended in that way, um,
Especially with Smee showing up,
especially with me,
as the
right?
street
But
leader. Yeah.
but that doesn't happen at the beginning of the movie. It only happens at the end. It's uneven, right?
Mhm.
Had Smee shown up beforehand, right? Had there been a
Yeah.
moment, and I'll bet you anything that in the original screenplay there probably is a moment where Bob Hoskins is around in the neighborhood, right? And the two
Oh,
of
I'm
them are
sure
having an
because
argument.
Maggie makes reference to, like, why is the why is the door or window left open? And Maggie's like, oh, it was because of that creepy window washer man. Well, up to
Yes.
that
Oh, you're
point, you have
right. You're right.
at that up to that point, you don't know it, like you haven't seen a window washer. You know nothing about a window washer. It's snowing.
Yeah.
Why is there a window washer?
Yeah.
Um, and
Yeah.
then
And then he's
once you
cleaning up the
meet him,
bottles.
there is zero reference to him washing like not even on the ship is he scrubbing windows.
Yeah.
No, nothing. It's just him holding a piece of paper saying, I've got his medical records right here.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
clearly he's been
There's,
spying on
yeah.
him.
Yeah.
And then
Yeah.
at the end of it, he's sweeping bottles, which doesn't make him a window washer. He's just a random dude cleaning up beer bottles. hmm.
Yeah.
But yeah, so he's
There's
referenced,
something
but
there. There's something
you
there.
don't catch that.
Yeah. So like to me, it's like there needed to be the like everything is normal except there is there's something underneath this. There's an undercurrent
hmm
here. And there are a couple of little hints of like, oh, like of like Wendy grandma, right?
hmm
Telling the kids like, oh, it's like these stories are all true and all of that sort of thing, where it's like
hmm
and obviously we're sitting in the movie is called Hook. We've seen the poster, we've seen the trailer, we know what's going to happen, right? But at the same
hmm
time, and the same would have been true for the Wizard of Oz. It's like you look at the poster and it's like she's there on the yellow brick road and it's called the Wizard of Oz. We know that this is going somewhere fantastical, but it doesn't change the fact that like the roller coaster, we look at the roller coaster and we know it's going to be the dips and the curves and the loops and all of that stuff. But the most thrilling part of the roller coaster is always the tick, 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 tick as it pulls you up to that beginning of that first hill. And this
hmm
movie it's kind of missing that a little bit at the beginning.
Yeah.
Because it's played so flat to me, you know what I mean? It also just takes so long. It takes so long to get to that stuff, and we spend so much time there's the play, and then there's the baseball game, there's the office in between that, there's the airplane, there's the getting to the house, the big fight, the going to the gala, and then the kids are taken, and then we got to sit with it for a minute before Tink shows up, and then Peter flies off to Neverland. And it's like there are so many beats to get us there that
hmm
yeah, I understand the struggle. I understand, because I look at that and I go like, it's all
It's a log
necessary.
flume. It's a log
Yeah,
flume. You
yeah,
get in the
yeah, yeah,
boat and you just kind of float along. You don't really think about it. And you're like, oh, this is
yeah.
nice and cozy. And then at the very end, there's a drop and then it's done.
Yeah, you're right. It's not. Yeah, if it is a roller coaster, this is
It's
not
not
the
a roller
Matterhorn.
coaster. It's a log flume.
Yeah, this is Splash Mountain. Yeah, we got to sit through them singing that song and oh my god, first time I ever rode Splash Mountain, it was pouring rain in Disneyland that day.
Oh,
And
really?
if you've ever been on a log flume, but specifically one of the Splash Mountains in the rain, you know that like if it's pouring rain, the ride starts filling up with water, right? Because parts of it are
Uh-huh.
outside, and so they have to turn off the pumps. And so the ride at a certain
Oh.
point, if it's raining hard enough, and this never happened, the one in Florida is in Disney World is probably more like tuned for this because they're more used to rain
Because it
there.
rains all the
But
time. Yeah.
but in California, it never rains, right? And that's the one that I'm riding is in California, and it like when it fills up with water, they basically have to shut the ride off. But it keeps going because it's filling up with water and the water's still kind of moving through the ride. So the first time that I ever rode it, we were already soaked from being outside in the rain. We're from
Uh-huh.
Vancouver, so it's not a big deal. Like we're used to the rain, and it was warm rain, so we were like, "This is actually kind of awesome." Because nobody else wanted to be at the park that day. This is like the second or third day that we were there. My first time going to Disney, and I, but because they basically shut off the water pumps because they're not pumping water into it because it's coming from the rain. The ride goes so slow, so slow,
Mm.
and that whole middle section of like after sort of all of the main story stuff has
You're
happened, and
just
then we
bobbing
get the
there.
zippity doodah, and it's just like it's just on loop right? Like it's just looping and looping and looping, and it was like, oh my god, somebody shoot me. Um, and then you get to the end, and then yeah, it you've got the big drop at the end of Splash Mountain, but
Yeah.
that's so funny. Yeah, so that's when I think of Splash Mountain, I always think of like that first time that I ever rode. Every time that I've ridden it after that, it's like, oh man, this ride's so quick. Because I always
Yeah.
expect it to be like a 15-minute ride, because that's how long it took to get through it, and it was a solid 5 minutes of zippity doo dah. I got a real good look at all of the animatronics, which is nice, but but yeah, the song gets a little grating after the fourth loop. That's so funny. But yeah, that's what this movie is for sure. Cause it takes so long to get to that scene with the food.
Mhm.
But then you get there and oh my God. It just like the movie like sings at that point. Like it just even John Williams, I think, had a hard time because you can tell like it doesn't sound like a John Williams soundtrack
Yeah, at first it
until
does. At first it does, and
yeah,
I'm like,
yeah,
"Okay, John Williams, awesome." And then there was, when I was watching it, there was that, like, near the end, I'd say, like, 3/4 of it that starts going, and I'm like, "Hang on, this is Steven Spielberg, so I know it's John Williams, but this doesn't really sound John
yeah.
Williamsy." But,
Yeah,
it is.
it's it's really interesting how out of character a lot of the score is for him. Even like the pirate stuff. It's so
Yeah.
interesting to me that like I would expect John Williams to like really go nuts with the pirate stuff. But it isn't there are these little hints that we get. We get the little hints. There are two main themes for there's a theme for Peter Pan and there's a theme
Mhm.
for the Lost Boys.
Mm,
And
mhm.
we get we get little moments of them as we build up, like sort of I as like when Wendy is like putting the kids to bed or whatever and like telling them the story, and we get like a little bit there of like, oh this like this is real, like it's actually gonna happen. And then we get little bits of like when the Lost Boys are kind of referenced, we get like a little bit here, and it's like, oh, and
Mhm.
Hook, we get a little bit reference there, but it isn't until that midpoint in the food fight where all of a sudden the music comes in, and then everything from there is like, okay, now we get some pretty great John Williams stuff and the themes that we expect from him. But before that, like especially the stuff before they even leave the real world, before we even get
Mhm.
to Neverland, doesn't sound like John Williams. It sounds like any other sort of like stock composer from the 90s. And I like it to
Yeah.
me, I like that was a choice. Like that was a decision that was made like in collaboration, I'm sure, with Spielberg and Williams, where it's like just make it sound like any other movie. Like literally, just make it don't like but then every once in a while we get those little bits, right? But
Mhm.
it's just kind of there are so many places where it's like I just wish that there was just a touch more, just a
Yeah.
touch more. If we were just a little bit more heavy handed with it and a little bit less, I don't know, because I think this is all going back to that Wizard of Oz thing. I think that Spielberg was trying to make the movie seem like it was just a boring family movie, meaning like a boring movie about a family,
Right.
right? And like lull us into a false sense of security so that once we hit the adventure, it's like, oh my God, we're in Neverland and we hit the adventure. And he was trying to do it in the same way that going from black and white to color did it,
Mhm.
right? Like to me, it feels like he had a nugget of an idea, but never got to fully realize it. And like that's one of the places where I think his sort of like discontent with the movie is coming from is
Yeah.
in watching it this time I was like what is it like, well, I don't understand, I love Hook, what's his problem with it,
Yeah.
right? And then
I
watching
think
it
I
back
think
I was like
part of that too with your Wizard of Oz comparison is because we don't land in Lost Boy territory. We
yeah,
land in pirate territory, which,
yeah,
still looks, the set piece is fun, and of course it's, pirates, but it's only adults. We are
Yeah.
familiar with pirates. We're familiar with pi you know, pirate motifs and taverns and whatnot. So it's kind of like, okay, well, I know we're in Neverland, but this still feels like
Yeah.
normal grown-up land. Whereas if you had, say, cut to being in a magical treehouse with lots of color and,
Yeah.
Alice in Wonderland flowers sniffing you, and like that's obviously like, oh, hello, this is very colorful and strange and weird. And so there's like that weird in between, like I'm never going to complain about Dustin Hoffman playing Hook. That scene is wonderful purely because of him, and it sets the stakes of I have your children. Um, but it's that from one story beat to the next, it's flat. And I think
Yeah.
that's why once you get that weird transition of, oh, he couldn't rescue his kids, but now there's mermaids and there's a giant clam chair, and now we're rolling down snow, and now we're in this magical treehouse with
Yeah.
bright, vibrant colors and weird plants. And and so you like, oh cool, this is the weird place that I always thought of as a kid being Neverland. But because you landed in that weird transition, like I feel like had it been shuffled a bit, like if Tink had dropped him off at the treehouse and, oh, you're back in Neverland, and he's like, no, and she goes like, well, I brought you here so you could rescue your kids. Enter in that shot of here's the island and here's the pirate ship, and so he's desperate to go back, and then he's with the pirates, and then you get your introduction to Hook, and then you figure out that the kids are there. I felt like maybe that would have worked a little better if that was
Mm.
truly what he was going for, but whatever. Like I said, I won't complain about Dustin Hoffman, and it was a great way
Yeah.
to show him off. So
There's an element to this movie, I think, that like Robin Williams is almost too good in the role, where like because we're supposed to like really feel like, oh, he's lost his magic, he's lost his inner child, all of that stuff.
yeah,
He's so almost like despicable that we're not rooting for him yet, right? Like, and
yeah,
I think to me, like, that is one of the pieces. And that moment, man, boy, does that hit so much harder as an adult than it did as a kid, when he's afraid of heights, and he's climbing up the thing, and he
yeah,
goes to reach out, but he like doesn't even. And then later on, when Jack is like, he didn't even try, like he didn't even
oh
try, he was
yeah,
there and he
oh
didn't
yeah,
even try. And it's like it hits so hard, because I look at that and I'm like, yeah, he kind of didn't, like he kind of gave up before he
hmm
even he even got to that point. And there's such a cutting line when Maggie is like, Mom could do it." I
yeah.
was like I was like,
He could
"That's
do it.
rough. That's rough. That sucks." Um, but yeah,
My
like we
my
kinda.
thought process was okay. If he's too terrified to reach them, why doesn't he tell them to start swinging, and they can swing over to him so he can grab it? But that's
Yeah. Yeah.
it's
Oh,
neither here nor there. But he didn't even put in the effort
there's a
to come up
million
with another way.
things that would have happened had this character been a heroic protagonist from the beginning of the story, but he's not. He's actually like, he's kind of the bad guy, and we're
Mhm.
introduced to Hook, and Dustin Hoffman gets to be Hook in this like very like arch, over the top, melodramatic
I
way.
love it. I
And
love
he
it so
and he
much.
just eats the scenery, right? And he's so good. He's
Oh,
so good. And the false teeth. Oh my god, what a choice! What a great choice! Because
yeah.
Dustin Hoffman's kind of already like got the that sort of, in his smile, he's got the big front teeth sort of thing.
Yeah.
But then they give him these disgusting pirate false teeth, and he plays with it, right? Like he makes it an overbite, and he
Mhm.
sticks it outside of his lip, and all the time, and he does this sort of thing where he almost like sucks on his bottom lip. That's
Yeah.
like this affectation that he gives Hook. when he's delighted, right? Like whenever Hook is in a good mood, his front teeth kind of just stick out over his bottom lip, and he kind of like almost like sucks it in. He's like, no, delicious, right? Like
I love it.
he's got those great moments. It's such a good performance. And then
Yeah.
you've got Robin Williams on the other side also giving a really, 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 because Robin Williams was such a brilliant actor. Like
Oh yeah.
whether he was doing comedic stuff or doing the more serious dramatic stuff, he was always, always on point. Um, maybe not always, but most of the time, 90
Right.
percent of the time, I feel like Robin Williams was just such a great performer.
You know,
And I
it's
think
so
like
funny
yeah,
as even as a kid watching it, like, okay, I understand this is a Peter Pan versus Hook story, but
mhm,
when I was watching it, that was Hook. I'd seen cartoon Hook, but this was Hook. I did not
yeah,
question, like, I knew this was an actor. His name was Dustin Hoffman, but that was Hook. And then watching Peter Pan, it wasn't like I bought the concept of this is a grown up Peter, and
yeah.
he's forgotten everything, and now he's trying to relearn everything, and woohoo, now he's Peter Pan again. I did not care. I did not care that he was supposed to be Peter Pan, who was
Yeah.
trying to regain his memories. I was watching Robin Williams have fun,
Yeah. Yeah, yeah.
and who was facing off against Hook. There was no concept of Peter Pan. I could have cared less. He could have died and Rufio won the day, and I would have been like, that was great. But it was just, that's Robin Williams. That's not Peter Pan. That's
Yeah.
Robin Williams.
Yeah. I think I can agree with that. When he has that turn and he becomes Peter Pan, it is a little bit like, "Oh, this is Robin Williams pretending to be a
Yeah.
kid," sort of thing. But
Yeah.
the juxtaposition of that is that like his performance as Peter Panning before that as this like serious businessman is like it's a little bit too good. He's a little
Yeah.
bit too believable as this jerk bad
Yeah.
father where it's like, well, you're not really like playing a character here. You're just a bad like you're just a bad father.
Yeah.
And yeah, you're just terrified and you're just all of these things and we spend so much time with him at the beginning like that then it's like there's a pressure valve that gets released in that food fight where all of a sudden we're like, oh, okay, finally this movie is fun. He does so much arguing with the film, right? Whereas like everybody else in the movie is like, well, this is where we're at. This is where we're at. Like this because like, obviously all of the Neverland residents are like, listen, this is real. This is happening. And
Yeah.
he's just that there in the hero's journey, as we know, there is a refusal of the call, right?
Hmm.
But usually it's like in Star Wars and A New Hope, it's I can't do that. I've got chores to do. I got to get back to the farm. My uncle's going to
Hmm.
kill me. Like I've already been gone long enough. Like he's going to be like, what the hell happened with these droids? I told you to have them ready to go first thing in the morning. We got quotas to make. I got stuff to ship, right? Like you're in, like I looks like I'm in serious trouble. And then Obi-Wan's like, yeah, okay, sure, whatever. And then they get back and his family's dead and he's like, okay, I guess I'm going on an adventure then. There's nothing left for me
Yeah.
here. it's so
Option two
it's
it is.
so brief. Yeah, it's so brief, right? um and then we're off and we're on the adventure. That is how the refusal is kind of supposed to be paced, whereas in this
Yeah.
movie the refusal of the call is like 15 minutes in the middle of the movie of him being
Yeah.
like, no, you guys aren't real pirates. It's like, Pete, you're standing on a pirate ship. He's got a hook for a hand. This is happening, dude. Like get with the program. It's happening. Your checkbook is not going to save you. That's like, again, it is more absurd that he pulls out a checkbook to be like, how much money do you want? As if these pirates are going to go to the bank to cash your check.
Yeah.
Then it is that there are pirates all around you. And I think that's kind of the point in that scene. But at the same time, it's like we spend so much time with that version of him, it takes so long to get to the fun part that when you do, it's like, sorry, I'm like choking on it. I yeah, it's like it's a lot. It's a lot. But then we get there. We get to the food fight, and even the lead up into it when he's still sort of disbelieving and the one kid's got the cheeseburger and he's
Yeah.
it looks, oh my god. He's having the best cheeseburger
He's
ever.
selling
The
it.
Spielberg, this is where I think Spielberg doesn't get enough credit as a director, is that like the kids in his movies
Yes.
more often than not work, and he is a good director of children, as opposed to his counterpart George being absolutely terrible at that part. And just like, Jake Lloyd, is not his fault. It's not on him. It's not
Yeah.
on him. He like George sat there and gave the kid nothing to work with, didn't give him any direction, and then they wrapped for the day, and George said, "That's good enough. That'll do."
Yeah.
And it's like, no, it won't. That wasn't enough. And it wasn't even like, that wasn't even the extent of what Jake Lloyd could give, because Jake Lloyd gives good performances in other films. So, and he's not terrible in The Phantom Menace either. I think that he's fine. It's just the yippee is the thing that I think people focus in on, and it's quite terrible. Because there's the "you're a pilot," and he goes, "all my life," and it was like, that's actually like a really great delivery of that line. And
It
"Are
is.
you an
I
angel?" and
mean,
all of that stuff, I
I
think is
can
actually really
see.
good. But
I mean,
sorry,
I could see my little Anakin saying something like that, because you'll say
yeah,
something to him and
yeah,
he's like, "Yep,
yeah.
sure am." Like, okay.
Yeah, I think a lot of the people who criticize child actors in films don't spend enough time with children in real life, because
Yeah.
they will say things, and a lot of the time when they say stuff in front of us as adults, it is for our approval. And so there
Mhm.
is um uh there's a put on, right? Like
Yeah.
yeah, whether it's an affectation or like an intonation or whatever, where it's like they're trying to be adults, right?
Mhm.
It's very contrived. The conversations that you have with you know 5 to 10 year olds, once they're at that point where they can start to sort of form their own ideas and then express them, you get a lot of that. You get a lot of that, of them talking to you
Mhm.
in that tone and with that sort of like, and they say things and it's like, that's like, we have a word for it. It's precocious, right? Like, it's like,
Right.
oh yeah, like you're definitely you don't know what you're saying, but you're saying it because you heard me say it, sort of thing. Uttering phrases that you don't know what that means, but you're right. Like, it's correct. You're using it in the correct context, but you don't actually know what you're saying, sort of thing. And then you see kids in movies, and it's like, and they'll do that sort of thing, and uh, and then people will be like, "Oh, this kid's such a bad actor," and it's like, no, that's how kids talk. That's how kids
Yeah.
talk. But then you get actors like Haley Joel Osment, who gives a performance in The Sixth Sense, which is a very different type of thing. And then people go like, "Oh my god, look at how good he is." Or Dakota Fanning was another one of those actors, right? That's like
Yeah.
giving these
Yeah.
performances that are so far beyond their years, and those kids are incredibly talented, and that's why. And like, there's a lot of maturity there, and the source material that they're working with is different. But it then makes us as film goers have this attitude that when a kid gives kind of like a stilted or sing-songy delivery of a line, that's like, oh, that's bad acting. And oftentimes I'm like, that's really not. It's really not. That is actually how kids talk a lot of the time. A lot of the time they sound artificial because they are like, they're
Yeah.
trying to figure it out. They're trying to figure it out.
Yeah.
um I was at a kid's birthday party last night, and we were all standing around listening to these 9-year-olds have a conversation amongst themselves. And it was like, we had like a group chat with the adults, and it was like, there was a little bit of a back and forth of like, it's hilarious when these small creatures start to sound like real humans, because they're at that age where they're just starting to sound like real people and not like
Uh-huh.
kids anymore. And it's that fun transition of it. But so that's just, it's having kids at that age right now, I think puts me in the position of going like, no, these kids are all giving great performances. They all sound exactly like the kids, like when I'm picking them up from dance and they're chatting amongst themselves, and then you go
Yeah.
like, "Hey guys, what's up?" And then somebody says something, and you're like, "Oh my god, like you guys are hilarious." Um, and these kids, like they in this movie give those kinds of performances, and
Yeah.
I think they're all great. I think every single kid in this movie is great. I think they're so much fun, and and their characters, like their individual characters, are so clear and interesting to me. That is to me, like that's the part of it. As a kid, I remember this being so much more of the movie, and then as an adult watching
Yeah.
it, going like, there's
There's
really not
very
that much
little.
here.
Yeah.
Like we kind of gloss over it, but we get that great moment
Maybe
when
just
they,
because we were children ourselves, that's what we attached
yeah,
to, you know?
yeah, I think so, right? It's funny because the movie itself kind of puts that in perfect perspective when Peter lands and he's gonna fight Hook, and he's like, I remember you being so much bigger. And then
Well,
Hook has
to a
the great line,
10-year-old,
to a
I'm
10-year-old I'm
huge.
huge. And it's just like,
Yeah.
it's like yeah, yes, to a 10-year-old, Captain Hook is a real threat. To an
Yeah.
adult, Captain Hook is a cartoon, right?
Yeah.
But like it's that shift in perspective. But there's such a great moment in the movie when they go to steal Hook, right? And there's the baseball game and all that, and it doesn't go the way that they're hoping that it's gonna go. And man, I should look up the character's name, but the one I'm just gonna say this. He's the fat one. That was the joke. He's the fat one.
Uh-huh.
But Peter leaves
Is it
defeated,
Toby?
right? Because,
Toby? Might have been
is it
Toby.
Toby? Yeah.
Mm, might have been
They
Toby.
call him
I could be
something
wrong.
along those lines. I can't remember what it was, but
Or
he,
Tubbs? Might be Tubbs. I feel
maybe it's
awful saying
Tubbs.
that.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
something like, yeah, I think it
Something
is
with a
something like
T.
that.
Yeah.
Um, but Peter leaves not having gotten the hook and being defeated and all of that sort of thing because Jack is like, he hits the home run, and and Hook cheers for him, and all of that. It's like, oh, this is what I've been missing. And he leaves, and then we get that moment where he's like, he takes off, this kid takes off the hat, and he's this really like sad moment. He kind of looks, and he looks back, and he looks, and it's such a great performance. Like that's such a brilliant
Yeah.
performance from that kid
When he
because you
throws down the
feel it,
hat.
right? Yeah, he throws it
Yeah.
down, and it's like,
He's managed to disappoint yet another child.
yeah, yeah, yeah. And it's yeah, but then when Pan comes back, right? And like the joy that those kids express is also like, it's equal. It's so
Yeah.
it's so visceral, but like that, like literally I got tingles when that colorful goop hits Rufio in the face, and the music swells, and then like John Williams comes in, and
Yeah.
he's like, hey
Yeah.
guys, I've been holding back, here we go, right? And he kind of like, you almost like see him pull up his sleeves and grab the conductor's wand and go like, let's rock their socks off, right? And then we get
Yeah.
that great music. um
I think my favorite part as a kid, and then again when I was watching it today, it still hits, man. That scene where I think they called him Pockets, the little, like the
mhm.
youngest of the boys.
Oh my god,
Rufio's
yes,
done
it's so
drawing the
good.
line in the sand, everyone goes over except for Pockets, and he starts like stretching back his face, and then he
Yeah,
gets like this wondrous look, and you can like the way Robbins performs it, like he's just so bare, open, vulnerable as this little kid
yeah,
tries to find physically who he used to be. And then
yeah,
he just get like his whole face just lights up and he's like, "Oh, there you are, Peter." And then you get like that that theme, that Peter theme
yeah.
being played. And I was
Yeah.
like, man, that just hits you because then they crowd all around, like, finally you've come back to me. Love it. It's my favorite moment.
It's so good. And I think as a parent, it hits really, really hard because like that is one of the things that your kids do for you,
Yeah.
is that you get to, through them you get to have these moments where you get to go back, right? And it's like it's
Yeah.
and the I think the one of the things that's so like sort of melancholy about it is that those moments are so few and far between and they're so fleeting. Like they come and
Mhm.
they go. And it's sometimes it's literally, I mean, for me, more often than not, it's sitting in the movie theater with them and we're at a movie and I look over at one of them and I see that they're just like they're in it. They're in it.
Yeah.
Like they're not sitting in that chair next to me. They are wherever. We just saw The Wild Robot, which is such a
Oh, yeah.
brilliant movie. Oh my god, it's so beautiful. It's such a great story. It's so perfect. It should win Best Picture for like Best Animated. I mean, it should be nominated for it's the type of animated movie that could be nominated for Best Picture, but it should definitely win Best Animated Feature. It won't. Inside Out 2 will. And Inside Out 2 is a great
Yeah.
movie, but it's not nearly as good. It's not nearly as good as The Wild Robot. But I remember looking over at Cassie, and Cassie, it's always been very difficult to get her to sit through a film. I looked over at her and she was like so in this movie, and I just get that, like I get an incredible feeling. It's like it is literally indescribable, but it is that
Mhm.
moment of like that's what it was like. Like I look over at her and I can see her and she's
Yeah,
in the
you get
movie.
to
It's like that's
re-experience
what,
it through
yeah,
them.
yeah, and
Yeah.
so you get to find that inner child, and they're like I said, like these moments are so fleeting because it happens and it kind of washes over you and then it's gone. And
Yeah.
you, as a parent, I think you kind of chase that high with them a lot, and it's like
Mhm.
let's go do this thing, watch this movie that I love, and you keep trying to recapture it, and then they're like, I don't like this movie, and you're like, oh no.
Yeah.
give me the give
Yeah.
me that thing that I'm after. But it's funny. But yeah, that moment watching it, rewatching Hook, I was like, yeah, that's what, like that, for the adult in the room, that's kind of what that is. That's kind of this little kid coming and yeah, pulling back his face and looking in his mouth and everything. And it's like when he looks in his
Yeah.
eyes, he takes the glasses off, right? Because that's the
Yep.
thing, is like he takes the glasses off and he looks in his eyes and he's like, oh, there you are. And it's like yeah, it is such a beautiful moment. um yeah, yeah, like I said, like this movie has so many problems. It's, if you wanted to be a cynic, you could sit here and go like, this is a bad movie. And I think that at the time, critically, that's probably a lot of what happened. I haven't really gone back to look at what the critical reception was. But I could see that
I
having
I
been
think
the
it
reception.
was mixed with
Yeah.
mostly positive. But the takeaway was it did decently, but it didn't do as well as people had hoped.
Yeah, yeah.
And that
Big
was mostly
production,
just
very
because
expensive movie, I heard.
they were like, "Why is Peter Pan grown up?" I think that was
Yeah, yeah,
the hurdle
yeah,
people struggled to get past. Which on paper, I mean, if you go into a room and be like, "Okay, I wanna pick up where Peter Pan would be like as an adult,
yeah,
learning
yeah,
how to be Peter Pan," which on paper, in a boardroom or whatever, that sounds fantastic. But getting an audience who knows him only as a little boy to jump on board and then be told he's an ass, um,
yeah, yeah,
it's a hard sell.
yeah, for sure. But yeah, but when this movie does, like when that magic comes in, it I mean, Spielberg knows how to do it. He's very good at it. He's
Yeah.
very good at getting those moments to hit, and they do. I
Yeah.
think like they're very resonant and they're very meaningful. And they
And it
really
works
work for me.
because those are the moments we remember, right? We have remember the little
Yeah,
boy
well, exactly.
saying, "There you are, Peter." We remember, the he's hungry because everything's make believe, but that moment he
Yeah,
starts believing and acting as a kid, suddenly there's turkeys and pies and bread rolls that came out of nowhere. And
yeah,
and it's that moment that's like, I remember what that was like.
yeah,
Pretending, having a plastic plate and going up to my dad or my mom and be like, "What do you want to order?" And then being like, "Okay, here's a cheeseburger." Or,
yeah,
um, with the cartoon, but also with this film as well, like, okay, I don't have pixie dust, but I can have a happy thought. And then, jumping off of a rock or a tree or your bed or something. And, for that brief moment, split second, you're in the air, I'm flying, and then you come crashing down. But it's that split second. And those are the moments that stick with you as a kid watching it. And then even as an adult, like, clearly you can see past that, but it brings you back that, I don't want to so much say nostalgia, but it kind of is this is why I love that film, because I connected to those moments. And even though there's all this other nonsense that I now see, I'm still able to grasp onto those moments, and therefore I really love this film.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I think that that's kind of the core of it, right?
Yeah.
The magic when it comes is powerful enough that it really just makes up for everything else that the movie maybe falls short on or is a little bit
Yeah.
uneven on, right?
Mhm.
And I think just the concept in and of itself. I think one of the other things that makes this a rough watch for some people is the fact that it isn't actually a Disney movie, right? It
Mm.
has all of the hallmarks of a Disney movie, but it isn't. It's Amblin and it's TriStar.
Mhm.
It is not connected to the Disney Peter Pan film, even though like it's so close. And I think like
Which is
that
interesting. When I was
is
reading it, it was when it was first being pitched, it actually was
yeah,
through Disney,
yeah, yeah.
but then they broke away from it.
Yeah, and I think that that is probably the biggest piece of it that is an issue is that
Yeah.
is how close it is. Because I would say that like later Peter Pan films that have come out have actually like gone out of their way to distance themselves from the Disney version of Peter Pan, because that's very much become sort of the definitive iconography of Peter Pan when people
Yeah.
think of Peter Pan, right? So
Mhm.
I whether or not, like that's I don't know if that's good or bad, but when you think of Tinkerbell is a Disney character. She's
Yeah.
not. Tinkerbell is public domain, as a matter of fact, and anybody can make a Tinkerbell story if they feel like it. But
Oh, did
Tink
not know that.
has her friends, and I like Pixie Hollow and all of this stuff.
Mhm.
And like when we think of Tinkerbell, we think of the green dress, we think of the little white pom poms on the shoes, we think of the blonde hair
Yeah.
in a bun, right? Like that character is the character from the cartoon. And
Yeah.
I think like one of the most interesting things in this movie to me as an adult watching it is the Julia Roberts aspect, where it's like that character is just in there as she's almost just there as Julia Roberts. And
Yeah. Oh,
there's there
100%.
there's a moment where she does the laugh, and it is so clear to me that they were just, because all of her stuff is shot separate, because she's on a green screen or she's in a different environment, she's inside her little clock, or she's in a lantern or something, right? And it's like this big set
Yeah.
that they've built around her to make her look little. And so they all of her stuff was obviously shot separately except for the one scene, right? I
Yeah.
And it's so
Which
clear to me
still
that
feels really weird and out of place.
oh my god, it's so off. But um it's so clear to me that like they shot a bunch of stuff that day, and Steven was like, we got to do one. You got to give me the laugh once, and then I'll figure it out where it goes in the movie. Right? Like,
Yeah.
because it's so disjointed, the reaction is so over the top for the thing that just happened on screen. It's like I don't remember exactly what it was, but like there's a like I think it's maybe the food fight. I think it's when he
Yeah,
gets hit
she's
with
laughing
the
in the
food.
food fight.
And she does the big Julia Roberts, Pretty Woman laugh that we expect
Yeah.
her to do in every movie in the '90s, right? And it's such
She
a put on, and it's so not in the moment. it's so off. It's so weird. Tink is the part of this movie that I have the hardest part with, where I'm like, this is not. I don't know what this is, but I don't think it's Tink. Like she's so off from
Yeah,
what the character is in every
even
other
as a
incarnation.
kid, I didn't like,
Yeah,
I didn't have a problem with her in the film, but I never saw her as Tinkerbell. She's just
yeah,
a pixie named
yeah,
Tink
yeah,
who
yeah.
can turn into a grown-up for a split second.
Yeah, it's also interesting because like she is so sidelined for a lot of it.
Yeah.
And that to me is such a funny thing because it's like obviously it's the special effects budget component of it that's doing that. It's not
Yeah.
anything else. But there is an aspect of like you look I believe the Peter Pan of it all a little bit more if Tink were persistent and not off screen shouting things at him half of the time, and then we cut away to like her sitting in a lantern or right, like in order to sell
Yeah.
these things. But if she were sitting on his shoulder the entire time, which like now if you made the movie, no problem, right?
Yeah.
You just have like a little CG thing and she'd be glowing bright, so you'd be able to sell it as you know, the little CG, or
Mhm.
even like superimpose, right, like green screen sort of thing. You'd be able to do that so easily now, but at the
Yeah.
time that was expensive. That was a lot of work. What they did with her was a lot of work, right?
Yeah. Oh,
Um,
yeah.
I so yeah, there's a funny component there. I can't help but feel like if this movie were made now, that there would be so many aspects of it that would be so much more effective. But then at the same time, I just don't know if it would work the way that it did in the 90s. There is that it has that 90s, as I said at the beginning, it has that 90s like, oh, the post Reagan, like everybody's working for the weekend sort of thing, like these
Yeah. Yeah.
like parents are unhappy, kids are unhappy, you know. We all need to reconnect, and the family needs to be, you know, brought back to the nuclear family needs to be brought back to the forefront, and all of that sort of thing. That's that tone in the
Yeah.
90s, about divorced parents and latchkey kids and stuff like that. That's very like late 80s, early 90s. um
Mhm.
so that's all very much there in the story, and it's one of the things that I think makes it work. And if you were to make it today, it's just, I don't know if it would sell the same way that it did back then. But uh because now, you know, we all have work-life balance and everything, but no, they've just convinced the world that work is actually
I
that
never knew
important.
that. I never knew that, so
Yeah, it's funny. It's funny. It's just I'm just like, when you look at movies and the way that work is portrayed in films now, it's always like everybody has a job that they love, that they find fulfilling, that is the thing that they went to school for. And when they need to have a day to go do this thing, it's not that big of a deal. They can go pick their kids up in the middle of the day. Like it's just, it's never an issue in films anymore. Like this
yeah,
idea,
that's true. That's true because it was kind of like that
it's
in
very much gone.
like the 50s and 60s old serials, like they go to work, but they don't really discuss it. It's always like the story starts when they're
Yeah.
home, except for something like, let's say, I Dream of Jeannie, when because he's with NASA, occasionally you'll get something, but like, and then when you get to the like 70s, 80s, sometimes 90s, okay, well, then it's work, but it's usually portrayed as like a hard thing or an
Yeah.
obstacle. And then, yeah, you're right. And then, kind of like in the late 90s and 2000s, it kind of starts switching back into a like, okay, it's just part of life, and that's just what you work towards. And then now, you're right. Most modern films or TV shows, it's kind of like work is the center of my life, and then
Yeah.
everything else comes around it. It's very
I
reflective.
It's something that I didn't notice in movies until the movie Juno, because it's
Mm,
actually like, and I think that this is intentional. I think that this is both, I like from the directing as well as the writing. It's intentional that like Jason Bateman's character, he's got. She has the line where she's like, I don't know, like find somebody cool, like somebody who's like a graphic designer that like, like makes their own hours and then she meets the Jason Bateman character, and he's this music producer, talent scout, or whatever it is that he does. And it's like, and he is just like at home all day. And it's like, it's the trope of the romantic comedy of like, oh, he's got this really cool job that's awesome, that pays him really well, but that he doesn't actually have to show up for, right? Because
Yeah.
that's become the romantic comedy trope, is that you're a graphic designer or a music producer, or it's always something in the arts, or like something like tech related, but it's like, but that's why they're rich and money isn't a problem. And also that
Boy, they got
they're
that wrong,
available in
didn't
the
they?
middle of the day. Yeah. Oh yeah. Well, oh boy. But
I feel like every
but the
artist I know of, they're at
yeah.
home because they can't stop working and they are not making a lot of money.
Yep, yep. But that was the funny thing in Juno, is that it turns out that like all these things that she thought that were going to be like like in the ideal, guy that would adopt her kid, right? It turns out that like
Mhm.
he's actually a piece of crap.
Yeah.
And it's like there's it was pointed, and like that movie made me think about it and go like, wait a second. But yeah, it's become very, and Juno is now not a modern film. Juno is a
Oh, yeah.
classic
It feels
film.
like a long time
It's
ago.
very, very long time ago. So yeah, and but yeah, film has really like taken this other turn with what it is to be a parent and all of that. Like I think of any of the kids movies, any of the family movies that I've watched with the girls, this is never an issue. It's never an issue. And their
Mhm.
expectation is that we're available to them 24/7. And I don't know, it's yeah, it's very interesting to me. But um I don't know that you could make this movie today. I don't know that you could make this movie today. But it still worked for me. It still worked for me in 2024. I still
Yeah.
enjoyed the hell out of watching it. um I watched it by myself, and that was probably like, that's just, it's December and we're all over the place, and there hasn't been time to watch like a half-hour TV show with the kids, much
Mm.
less a full film. Um, I would have liked to have watched it with them, but I before recording, but that wasn't, it just wasn't possible. So I had to watch it by myself. I would love to know what my girls thought of it, but and sort of their perspectives on all of this stuff, especially Cara, because I think she'd have some commentary that would be interesting. But
Mm.
for
Mine
me,
don't think about
as
it
an
too
adult
deeply.
reliving it, no, no.
No,
Um,
they just would have been
I
like, it was fine," and then that would have been about as much thought as they put into
yeah,
it.
Cara, that's usually Cassie's like, that I liked it. I didn't like it. I like this character,
Yeah.
right? Like she's usually pretty surface with her film reviews, but Cara is very much like me and will be like, I thought that this part was really cool, and like we can get into it and we'll start a conversation about something else. But yeah, so I don't know. Hopefully, I get to watch this with them in the future.
Mhm.
But I had to rent it. It's not on any of the streaming platforms, which is interesting.
Peacock. Yeah.
Oh, okay, for you guys. Yeah, we don't have Peacock up
Well,
here,
here
so
in America, it's Peacock,
okay.
yeah.
Okay. Yeah, yeah, it wasn't on any of mine, so I had to rent it. So we'll go out of our way to watch it, which means that we won't.
Well, it because I asked Greg last night, I'm like, "Is it streaming?" He's like, "Oh, yeah, it's on Peacock," and I was like, "Okay," because I was getting ready to, like, dust off the old DVD case,
Yeah.
blow it off like
Oh
a
boy.
relic and crack it open.
Man, that sound, that sound of the plastic, the DVD case
The
opening, that's a
crinkle and
real.
the pop. Yep.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Oh boy. I Cool. Well, hey, I think we did it. I think we did it. Was there anything else
Cool.
about this movie that you wanted to talk about before we wrap it up?
Don't think so.
No, we got
No.
it. Awesome. Awesome. Well, before we sign off on all of that, is there anywhere on the internet that you would like to direct people to check out your stuff? I'm sure that there's
Sure.
some fan fiction and whatnot.
Sure, sure. So I'm no longer on Twitter/X, whatever you're calling it. I nuked it from space. But I am now on Blue Sky and kind of a lurker on Tumblr as well. But still same name, 87 Zoo Lemons. You can find me there. Mainly on Blue Sky though. And if you're in the mood and enjoy fan fiction, then you can find me on Archive of Our Own. Danny Marie is my author name, and I just wrapped up a Indy 5 retelling of Star Wars Outlaws, if that's your jam. So yeah,
I think
adding to it.
everybody should go check out your stuff for sure. I mean, man, Star Wars Outlaws. You already I think you messaged this at me on Blue Sky that we got to do Star Wars Outlaws for a Perfect 10 in the future,
Yep.
and I agree. Well, we'll wait until after the second DLC comes out, which I think is in March, which is the bigger one, but
Yeah, spring, they say.
yeah,
So yeah,
yeah,
which
and
will be perfect.
I think yeah. We'll have to put it on the schedule for sometime in 2025. But I will just say right now, yeah, Star Wars Outlaws, absolutely a perfect 10. Absolutely a perfect 10. What a game, what a story, so good.
Mhm. I'm
We're
almost done with my second playthrough already. So
awesome. Awesome. Yeah, I want to because I think that Crystal would really like the story of it and some of the characters, and I'm like,
mm.
but could I get her to sit through me playing the game? I don't know if I could because she'll never play it. But yeah, it's one of those things where it's like, oh man, I wish this story wasn't locked inside a video game because I think that she would really enjoy some of the characters. But
Oh
that
yeah,
Lando DLC was so good. It was so good. It was
it
brief,
is
but it
so
was
fun.
so good.
Yeah.
Awesome. I am also on Blue Sky now and have basically abandoned Twitter /X. So go find me over there. I'm at Arkwolf, and you can find my art accounts at Archangel Wolf, Archangel with a K and Wolf with a U. But I think you guys probably already know that. And Perfect 10 is on all of the social medias as well. And I mean, like technically everything is still up on Twitter. I haven't like deleted anything, but we're not really. If that's where you've been like following us, don't anymore. Everything's over on Blue Sky now, pretty much. That was on Twitter. So come hang out on Blue Sky, but more importantly, come hang out in the Discord. The Discord is really the place to be on the internet. I think if you're a listener of this podcast, but I think all 10 of you are already in the Discord. So Perfect 10 continues to have absolutely no audience, but I will do it anyways because it's just an excuse to talk to my friends about cool stuff.
It's
But
a
that's it.
it's a good time. It's a good time to hang out.
Yeah. Yeah. It's so funny because like if we were talking about doing Perfect 10 like as like a successful podcast, right? Then it was like, well
Mm.
then cancel it, because in terms of like hundreds of people, thousands of people, hundreds of thousands of people listening, not going to happen, I don't think. But I can't stop doing Perfect 10 because every time that I talk about it on the internet, it's like there's like you and Marie Claire and you know Tim Dipple and like just a bunch of people who are like yeah man, when's the next Perfect 10? I'm excited for the next Perfect 10. Oh, it's such a great podcast, it's so much fun, I love recording it, I love listening to it. And I'm like, yeah, you guys do, my friends do, but I just can't get anybody else to listen to this podcast, even though I think it's pretty good. I think it's pretty good. So we're going to continue. We're going to keep going.
It's very fireside chat. So I will say that about it.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. Yeah.
for the listeners out there, Michael's been having me do timestamps for the episodes, and I just wrapped up doing some for his Red versus Blue Pokemon episode, and I'm not the most social person in the world, but listening to it, it was literally like hanging out with a group of friends and just talking Pokemon. Like,
Yeah.
obviously, it's Michael and his guys just talking about it, but me as a listener, listening to it was kind of like sitting at that lunch table reminiscing about Pokemon. And that's what Perfect 10 kind of feels like. It's like a small group of people just listening and being like, oh yeah, that film or that game or that book or comic or whatever. That's what it feels like.
Yeah. 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 And that's what it's supposed to be. So yeah, the tone is intimate and so is the audience. But like I said, like I literally couldn't stop doing it, because if I did, I'd get angry messages from all my friends of like, what do you mean you're not going to do Perfect 10 anymore? So I have to keep going. I gotta keep going. We got it
Well,
all
I won't
scheduled
send you
out to
any
the end
angry
of the year. So.
messages.
Okay. Yeah. I awesome. And yeah, and you have been doing those timestamps, and then I have not been doing anything with them, which is so silly of me, but I will. I want to get all that stuff up. I want to put clips and stuff on TikTok, because I think that people will find it through that. Right. But
Yeah.
that takes
Yeah.
time.
Some of the shorter clips and stuff. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I think so. But awesome. Well, thank you everybody for listening to Thunderquack Perfect 10. If you found joy in today's discussion, be sure to subscribe on your favorite podcast service and leave a rating and review. The ratings and reviews are so important, especially on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. Like, that is like the key metric that they look at to push it to other people. So and it'll be like they're looking at it, everybody just got their Spotify Wrapped, right? Like, they literally, one of the things, because they send that to Spotify creators as well, you get a Wrapped for your show, and one of the things that they show you is like what everybody else is listening to. And so if you guys are all listening to the same things or similar things, then it's going to like recommend Perfect 10 or any of our other podcasts to people who also listen to those podcasts. But it's not going to do that without the ratings and the reviews. So that is like the most important thing that people can do in order to support the show. So if you have a minute, just go quick, leave a 5 stars only, please. No, you can leave an honest review. It's fine. But I prefer the 5-star ones. And a nice little review to let people know what the podcast is like and what it's about. Be super, super helpful. And as I said before, if you want to chat about today's episode, you can head over to our Discord at thunderquack.com/Discord and hang out with the Thunderquack community, which is like cool people only. Like for real, like the Discord is so great. I never have to moderate anything, because I think we got about 40 or 50 people in the Discord. It's a very small community, but everybody that's there, and everybody especially that's very active on the Discord, it's just there we mostly just share memes and then go like, I saw this thing, I thought it was cool, or I saw this thing, maybe skip it. But even when the review is bad, it's not negative, which I think is a thing that's missing out there on the internet these days. Everybody loves that rage bait engagement. So come hang out with us on Discord for sure. And Danny, thank you so much for hanging out and giving me your Saturday to talk about Hook. It's a good time as always. And yeah, we'll figure out when we're going to talk about Star Wars Outlaws for sure, because I want to. Awesome. Until next time, remember, it's not about the score, it's about the love. Stay frosty. Thunderquack Perfect 10 is hosted by me, Michael Cohen. Follow us on TikTok, Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook at TQPerfect10, and join the community at thunderquack.com/Discord. This podcast is supported by listeners just like you over at patreon.com/Thunderquack. Head over there to get early access to episodes, exclusive podcasts, and more. This show is a part of the Thunderquack Podcast Network. Head over to thunderquack.com for more great shows. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you on the next one.